Welcome to Thin Fat Line, the podcast that explores the line between loving yourself just as you are and the unhealthy and toxic things we do and say, sometimes in the name of health. Hosted by Whitney Andrews, a girl who has been coming to terms with her own journey of health and self-love for as long as she can remember. Warning, the following conversations may be triggering and may discuss sensitive topics. Please move forward as you feel comfortable. The goal of this podcast is to create a conversation and community of support and understanding. Welcome to Thin Fat Line.
Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Andrews with Thin Fat Line. I am going to jump into this. It's been a while, and I took notes, and because I felt like there's a lot of information to talk about, and I didn't want to miss anything. I wanted to make sure I used the right words.
Yes. I'm glad to see I'm not the only note taker in the world, by the way.
I am. And I mean, anybody who knows me or doesn't know me knows that I could like talk in circles. So it's really important for me to
Bullet point it,
write it down, do something.
Yes.
Or I will not necessarily trip over my words. I'll just keep coming back to them over and over, circle around. So I am here with Jim Chapman of Local Leaders Podcast.
Yes.
Envision Podcast Studios. He's just like the my podcast guru right now.
I like that word.
You're welcome.
Podcast guru.
I'm going to expect to see that on your business card next time you have something.
I will. I'm going to put it as a Google review from you. The podcast
the
guru. I love
podcast
it.
guru. So, I mean, as many of the listeners know, I launched this on July 14th on my birthday. I couldn't remember my birthday. This is why I have notes.
Wow. Yes.
And I realized that I was kind of going in a direction, you know, that 1 degree shift in direction from where you want to go.
Right.
And I thought, I'm going to pause. And then I'm going to pause for a month. And then a month later, a little hurricane hit that just wiped out, you know.
Yeah, it was a little wind.
A little wind came through. And, you know, and then the holidays and stuff happens. And so here we are. And I had reached out to you and said, this is something I want to do. Let's talk about your studio. Let's talk about all this. And here we are sitting down.
Here we are.
So I just wanted to kind of come back and talk about it and reintroduce, but also kind of talk about some things going on with me and kind of start this thing off fully transparent and talk about just kind of my years of kind of like experience and dealing with a thin fat line of things.
Yes.
So
yeah, and it's just to tell the listeners out there, when Whitney approached me with this, I thought it was a great subject that a lot of people struggle with, and Whitney has some very interesting insight into that particular thing, and so I was fully on board with supporting that any way I could, obviously, but I'm excited about it. And I've kind of been following the stuff that you've been doing, just, I guess, sporadically as you could. Life happens, right? I mean, things kind of just happen, and your plan of recording may get pushed to the wayside.
Well, and I think, and I talk about that, and I'll talk about that is for the last, I think, 6 years, I've been really transparent in telling my stories on social media, but there are obviously these little bits of curated, sometimes nonsense, and sometimes I feel like really important stuff. And that was not the first time. I think the first time I really kind of opened up into being fully transparent with my journey into kind of my health and my size. And at the time it was my size, if I'm being honest, is I went viral on the Chive in a pair of Superman underoos.
Sweet.
They were over my yoga pants, but I was going to play flag football.
Yeah.
And I was in the background. You can go look it up, anybody, of a little puppy on a barbell.
Yeah.
And somebody made a meme, and it's like, do you even lift, bro? But in the background is me.
Yeah.
And I forget what our flag football team was called. And Superman underoos with my yoga pants under those.
Yeah.
And the comments were like, oh my gosh, Wonder Woman's lost her way. Like, just, they were not kind. Some of them like didn't even notice me, which was fantastic. Then there were others that were not kind. And it was when I first met my husband, but we weren't really dating. Mm-hmm. And we had gone to get ice cream. We weren't dating. We always joke about that. We had probably been dating for a while. To know my husband is to appreciate the fact that I tell him this story and I'm crying, and he just started laughing. He goes, this is the greatest story ever. And I'm like, and then they said this, and he's like, oh. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Do you not
Right.
see me?
Yeah.
He
Iron board across the head in some households.
But I was so like, I don't know that I knew and appreciated at the time how much I needed somebody sitting across the table bringing the humor to it.
Yeah.
And he didn't do it intentionally. Like, it wasn't planned out.
No.
He's just like zero. Empathy is not a gene that he has.
Right.
Thank God, because I have enough for the both of us. So
Right.
it's a nice balance.
Yeah.
But it was so funny. And I remember telling him that story. And then I wrote kind of a blog post, that was in the time of blogging. And I just, I don't know what I wanted to do. I've done a lot. Anybody who has known me before this knows.
Yeah.
And I said something about, I started thinking about if we're this mean to people with the things that people can see, whether it be their size, whether it be whatever it is, whatever physical attribute they have, we are so cruel about it. Imagine those suffering with like any kind of like mental distress, depression, bipolar, the things you can't see. No wonder they don't put it out there.
Right.
Because a picture is dissected and taken apart. And I wrote that, and I remember that was kind of my next instance of like, people really wanted to hear it. I mean, it just kept getting reshared and reshared. And this was, business pages existed, but not in the sense that they did now. And they were still being seen. Maybe I should say that. Facebook wasn't like pushing them down.
Yes.
It wasn't the pay to play game that it is now.
That's right.
But it just kept, and I was like, man, people, they want a voice in this. And that was that was almost a decade ago. And so I just sporadically would share my tidbits and share like, this is my journey, and try to be really transparent about it. And then actually Andrea reached out to me, was like, I want to meet you. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been taking her elderberry forever. This is amazing. I'm so excited. And she told me she wanted to do a podcast. So this was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want you to be a guest. And now here we are within a week of each other.
Yeah.
Both recording. And so this has been something that I think I've been telling the stories of it forever. And now I'm just like, we're going to put it together.
Yeah.
And I want other people to feel comfortable and build a community where we can talk about these things from a place of understanding, not a place of judgment or this is how you should do it or whatever.
Right. And I will say that, it takes some nerve to kind of put yourself out there like that. And that's something I respect. It's not easy. It's not easy to talk about a subject maybe that is not the most accepted, I guess, of subjects. And it's hard because you're doing it from a first person perspective, right? You're not talking about someone else and their experience. You're talking about you and your experience. And when you do that, you really open yourself up. And so kudos to you for having the bravery, I guess, to do that.
I'll take a bow now.
Yes.
I'm sliding out.
Yeah,
I've done my job.
I prefer pirouettes.
Well, and I think though, do you ever think about how it does? I'm not going to discredit that, and I'm so appreciative, but I think I always think about confidence and how I want to raise the girls and kids and even the boys and all this to treat people. And it's like the first line, people learn how to treat you based on how you treat yourself.
100%.
So if I'm taking everything that I'm feeling about myself or stuff that's happening and keeping it, I'm not saying you have to put it out there. There's some stuff that like, no matter how much I share, there's some stuff that's just not your business.
Right.
Like being personable and putting a story out there is not the same as sharing my entire life. You're not entitled to it. But what I do think is that if I say, hey, it's okay to talk about, I can recognize these things. I can recognize that there's not a lot black and white in this world.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of emotions, and people respond to how they look, how they feel, how they treat other people based on their past experiences, something that I've never lived that. Even my brother and I, same parents, same this, yet we respond to things totally different.
Sure.
Because our
I got
experience
twin
is different.
girls that do respond differently to things.
So people's first inclination of how to treat you is how you treat yourself. So if I'm like, this is me, they're going to say, oh, that's her. Cool.
Yeah.
Glad she likes. If people respond to weakness in negative ways. So even if they don't mean to, you can be the
100%.
nicest person in the world. And if you notice a weakness, it's just, I think, that tribal human biological mentality to be like, cool, I know how to push their button. And I'm like, I'll tell you how to push my buttons. Like, here's my buttons, push them. And, but it's just, I think how do you say, hey, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to put myself out there because I want to inspire you to kind of own who you are.
Yes.
Like, I don't know where the line between, the glorification of obesity and body positivity lines. I don't know where the line is between the things we do for our health that serve us and the things that are really toxic. I don't know where that line is, and it's probably different for everybody. But what I do know is that it is okay to exist in your body and to love your body and still want to work to improve.
100%. And look, I'm going to just say this, and this is just another perspective, but I saw that before on your comment. Oh, you did a post and you had some kind of ugly comments regarding, well, you're glorifying obesity. And so I'm going to just say that's not what she's doing. Okay. What she's doing is she's glorifying being comfortable in your own skin. There's a big difference between that, and she's not telling people everybody needs to go out there and weigh 350 pounds. She's not saying that. She's saying if you're in that situation, and I'm speaking for you, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume you're saying if you're in that situation, work hard to be comfortable in your own body, until you maybe can get out of that if you can.
Well, and I think absolutely. And I think it goes both ways. Like, I had somebody who, and I look forward to having her on, who talks about the fact that for her entire life, she's not been able to put on weight. People are like, oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. You're so lucky. Oh my gosh. Like, I struggle with this all the time. You're so lucky. And she's like, I get it. The other side of I'm doing everything in my power, and you just don't know what people are going through. And so it's like, you have to teach people how to treat you. And that starts with treating yourself. And so if you're in a body that's 300 pounds and you're noticing negative side effects, health side effects, all that stuff, then you can both work hard to love your body. That is just as important as dealing with the negative health effects of maybe what that weight is doing to you. But I don't think it's something you can compartmentalize. I truly believe, in my experience, the first thing I had to deal with was, how do I really find that honor and respect and that love for myself before I've even been able to go on a journey to deal with? And then I was able to answer, maybe I should say this. I was able to say, is the weight actually affecting my health? Or is this something that's just, this is the size of my body and I'm healthy? For me, the weight is affecting my health. Mm-hmm. The actual physical aspect of carrying around, extra weight, but I will say the actual having fat and being a larger size did not have to affect my mental health. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that I didn't connect for so long in my life, was that to have fat, and I try to say that, I have fat, I am not fat. You have fat, you are not fat. You do not have fat, it doesn't have to be an adjective. Yeah. It's a noun. I also have fingernails. I'm not a fingernail. It's just, it's not an adjective, but I think that's really what it comes down to, is where does that line exist in everything? So, which is,
why the name is so genius, Thin Fat Line.
Right. And so it was the other name.
That's genius.
I'm glad you feel that way.
It really was a good
I was just going to call it Elephant in the Room.
Yeah.
And people were like, I don't know that they're going to connect it. And then it came up with Thin Fat Line. And I think that's where it really does, because for so long, I think we've made fat a bad word. Mm-hmm. And what if it just was a noun? Because it's so important.
And it is. And we were talking about this off camera, but to me, that word brings up so many negative connotations to me. I used to get very upset with female friends of mine because they would say I'm fat or something. And look, some of these ladies were not fat, or, what people would classify as that. But to me, it's just such an ugly word. It's like the first thing people think of is negative. They go negative when they hear that word. So what you're trying to do is maybe, do what you can to take the negative condensation out of that word, if I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And I think not just when it comes to our body, but I was sitting down with, shout out to Kylie Arnold. I was sitting down with Kylie Arnold, and we're just like co-working on some stuff.
And she is, for the people that may not know, she's
with Arnold Nutrition
yes.
Coaching. And she is a nutrition coach, and she really focuses on balance. And so she's doing this event, and we're talking as, I guess, peer to peer, and about kids putting lunch together. And there was a section, and it said like fats. And people are so quick in their diet to think, oh, I don't want any fat because thank you, the 1980s and 90s for everything no fat, low fat. And she's like, but it's such an important aspect of our diet. So it's amazing how we've taken a 3-letter word and made it negative in how we eat. We've made it negative in how we treat our bodies. We've made it negative in all these aspects when really fat is just a noun.
Yeah.
You know? Just a noun, and it's really important to have on your body. Let's also not discredit that, you know. Right. Try going out in the snow with not an ounce of fat on your body, you know.
Yeah. You're gonna freeze pretty quick.
That's why I live in Louisiana, because I have none on my body.
Oh, you're so
but
funny.
Yeah, so I mean, and I've been called fat to my face more times than I can count. I think that's one of the things. I don't like that. I was called fat when I was 80 pounds smaller than what I am now. Like, I get tickled because I'm just like, you damned if you do and you damned if you don't. You know, I've been told to hold my stomach in. I've been told, I wrote down all the things. I've been asked if I was okay when I lost weight. I think that's always my favorite, is like you actually start losing weight or you start feeling good about yourself. And people are like, what's wrong? Are you sick? What's going on? You've lost too much weight. You're too skinny now. And it's like, what? You know? You know, and on the other side, I've been praised for how good I look when I lost 40 pounds because I was on meds for debilitating migraines. And they were like, oh my God, you're looking great. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And I'm like, thanks, I'm really sick. Appreciate it, you know. I think I wrote a story on my Instagram, but you can call it the Fat Bartender. I've been asked not to be in company photos because I would, quote, stand out.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what?
That is awful.
But it's, you know, it's awful, and people don't want to think it happens all the time. I mean, these are not unique things. I was sitting here, I did, when I first decided to start this, I made like a little Google form, you know, and I just wanted people's experiences. If I, at least out of those, I'd say 50% have been asked to stand in the back, even though they were the shortest, to move, to do something, to shift, because they didn't care.
Yeah.
People cared. Other people cared. And all of this, I think I wrote down, I have had acquaintances concerned with my health. I think that's when I get really annoyed, is because you have a lot of fly-by-night health coaches that are like, I'm just concerned with your health. Or you have, I'm going to say, friends who are concerned with your health. You weren't concerned about my health when I was like, you know, 19, standing on a bar at Fred's in Tigerland taking shots. You had no concerns with my health and what I was doing. You were up there pouring the liquor in my mouth. Yeah. You know, like, don't talk to me about being concerned with my health.
Yeah. What about if you're 47 and you're on the bar at Fred's?
This is a no judgment zone. My mom is like, right now, she's going to listen to this and she's like,
that was last Saturday. I'm just kidding.
My mom was just like closing her eyes like, oh my gosh. Yeah. My sweet mom, she's like from Jonesboro, Louisiana. And she's like, I've just never done any of that. But, you know, I think the other thing is like, I've worked with companies in the health and wellness, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry and a whole other story that is banked on the fact for you to fail. Like, that's how they make their money, is if you fail and then you come back to them. Yeah. It can't be consistent. And I get tickled because all the companies I've worked with, and let me preface that I will never talk negatively or give names or anything about anything, all seemingly either more toxic just in what they were preaching or just more toxic for me. Like, and yet I kept doing it in the name of health, like, because it was what we're trained to do. Like, if it's a diet industry, it must be healthy, because carrying fat cannot be healthy. But I mean, I, you know, put in here, and I've talked about this before, like being in a relationship with a partner that, and admittedly said it, I'll fatten you up because nobody would want you anyways. And it's just like, you look at the stuff that we kind of put our bodies through and we start to believe about ourselves. And I mean, if everybody always laughs about that relationship because they're like, you were the last person that would get in that. And, you know, and here I was just as easy. And I do genuinely think so much of that was he preyed on that one button, which at the time was what I looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, I'll press this button and it'll keep her here because
Right.
that's what they do. But I think that's the thing is like, I can deal with people's opinions on my size. I have not only been doing it for 15 years, but spent time in therapy to deal with the opinions I have on other people's opinions of me, which is like a tongue twister of its own. But I think it's important that I say that because in a sense of transparency and talking about this thin fat line and talking about topics that are really deeply personal to people, and people owe us no explanation on their motivations or what they're doing. But I just want people listening who maybe aren't sharing their story or don't want to talk about it to know that you don't have to just deal with other people's opinions. You know, you need to learn kind of like, what are my opinions of myself? What's going to like honor myself? Because people are going to have opinions no matter what.
Sure.
I've had them all across the board.
Right.
So, yeah. But I'm flipping pages because notes.
I have well, I'm not going to say it, but you know what they say about opinions.
They say everybody's, what is
Everybody's
it?
got one.
Like
and
yep. And they're all full of shit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Exactly.
I'll curse on mine.
Yes. We don't
Trigger
even have
warning.
to bleep that out.
Right.
Love it.
I will do my utmost to not drop. Sometimes I'll get really fired up and I'm like, there's only one 4-letter word to like adequately describe it. I don't think there's anything here that will.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think since I was 15, I've questioned what it is to be healthy. And I personally know, and I think this is what's important is like, only I can know how my body exists best. I personally know that me carrying around the weight, it doesn't exist optimally. When I carry extra weight. And I mean, I questioned everything I knew about that. Like if I admitted that my body didn't function optimally, did that mean that I hated myself?
Yeah, and I think that's probably where the line exists is right there. I would imagine, of course, you know, your body is a machine, right? It's like anything else. You've got a heart, you've got lungs, you've got all these things. And because someone wants to be able to climb a mountain without being out of breath or pick a thing, but because someone wants to do that does not mean necessarily they're not happy with themselves. It just means that they know what it may take to get to that point.
Right.
And so I totally get that. Which is another reason I like the name of your show, because what it seems like you're trying to do is find that line.
Right. I think find the line and challenge others to find that line for themselves, you know? I mean, because this was all born out of where's the line between body positivity and glorifying unhealthy behavior.
Yeah.
You know, because just because I love myself just as I am, just where I am, and I found that love for myself when I was doing really unhealthy things, it didn't mean that when I stopped doing those unhealthy things that I had to keep my life just as it was.
Right.
I mean, if you think about, you can be really happy in a position at a job and still when another position comes available, say, hey, I'm going to upgrade, you know?
Good point.
It's amazing to me that we always constantly strive to be a little better, but when it comes to our health or our bodies or what we look like, it's like, oh, well, I don't need to change anything about who I am. And it's like, cool, you may feel that way. And I 100% support you. And that's not where I am.
Yeah.
And my motivations to change, whereas they're none of your business, I try to share them because sometimes they have nothing to do with, I just want to look a different way. Sure, I want to like, there are things that I'm like, oh, I don't like that shirt on me. Like, cool, I don't wear this shirt anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, tidbit, one of the greatest things I ever did for myself, no matter the size, was buy clothes that fit me.
Right.
No matter what the tag said. Sometimes I didn't even look at them. I'll just like grab 3 that look different sizes and be like, if you don't look at it, it'll be fine. And those are days, some days. And I just have to know, like, don't look at the tag today. You're having like, do you watch TikTok?
I do.
Okay. So you know about
Somewhat.
the pug, bones, a bones day and a no bones day? Noodle. Okay, there's Noodle the pug, and Noodle the pug every day tells you if it's going to be a bones day or no bones day. And if Noodle's just like, yeah, I'm not getting up, I have no bones, it's a no bones day. It's a self-care day, right? Those are the days I don't look at the tags. I just grab what makes me feel good, right?
Yes.
But then there are bones day, and you're like, today I'm going to be like, look at me sliding into these size 20 jeans. Like, you know, like those are the days that you just
Wonder
like
Woman
own it.
underage.
Yes. So it's just, those are bones days, and sometimes they're no bones day. And I just know like, hey, I need a little self-care today. And sometimes self-care looks like saying, hey, I know that number, I'm not going to step on the scale. I'm not going to worry about it today. Like, I'm not going to worry about whether or not I finish the workout. I'm going to take care of myself, you know? Shout out to Noodle the pug.
Shout out Noodle.
Noodle. I tell my husband all the time, I was like, that's why I watch TikTok. Sometimes it's just good for my mental health.
Yes.
But, you know, I remember I opened up to my community. I launched social. I had a page called the Healthy Pelican because I have just a slight obsession with birds. It took everything I had not to name this podcast something with a bird in it. But Big Bird was my first celebrity crush. And
Oh, Lord.
I'm obsessed with pelicans. Their pelicans
Isn't
are
it
like
cute?
pteranodons.
Yeah.
And they're vicious and they're awesome. And then they like glide across the causeway.
I got
like
an eagle obsession. I love eagles.
Birds
Beautiful
are amazing.
animals.
They're the closest living thing to dinosaurs.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever seen a chicken between the cute chick stage and a full-grown chicken stage? You realize they're dinosaurs. They're
Right.
just like, "Rah." I won't do my pteranodon sound.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah,
then
please do.
I'll like blast out like this is warning, turn your radio down, you know, like, but yeah, so I like renamed Healthy Pelican. I was like, I'm going to do this podcast. And I did it. I launched a podcast. It was that simple, like recorded something on my phone and I was done. And everybody like, it was great. And the crowd went wild, except it like wasn't. There was the logistics of it all, which is where you came in because it was like, the sound quality, my mom was like, I could barely hear it. And I'm like, well, turn it up, you know, like, you know, you're instantly like, I work so hard. And then, and you know, it's easy to kind of like look at our parents and be like, really? You had to insult me? I work so hard.
Yeah.
And it was like valid, constructive thing. So thanks, Mom.
You know, it's
I
interesting
listened.
though. Let me just say this, and is anytime you ask, it seems like people in general, the majority of people, I don't want to throw everybody in the same bowl of gumbo.
Throw them in the gumbo, as long as it's not okra and tomatoes.
The majority of people, it seems like when you ask an opinion, they almost look for a negative because they want to feel like they're giving you a constructive opinion, right? So it's like, oh, everything was good except. And I'm like, you don't have to say something negative so I know you paid attention.
Right.
Just tell me it was good.
My mom did not do that. I will.
I've had that happen to me.
But no, they do.
know?
And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
That's great. And you can kind of tell. My mom called me. She's like, I listened to the podcast. It was wonderful, but I could barely hear it. And I'm like, oh. I had to pause because, you know, our parents get the worst of us, right? Like, I'm sure you feel that with teenagers and stuff now. I know I feel it. And I know my mom got the worst of it. You know, she gets the best and worst, just like I do of her. And I was like, and I had to pause and be like, she's right. I recorded it in a closet, my closet. And I had a little microphone. I mean, I had a microphone, but it's just, you can only do so much.
It's not an SM7B by sure. Right. Shout out, sure, SM7B.
Shout out. But, you know, and then there's the editing and then space for guests. I mean, I couldn't really invite guests into my closet. Be like, hey, I want you on the podcast. Can you come upstairs
just
to my
move
closet?
those dresses out of the way. Don't worry.
Just sit on that pile of shoes. No big deal. Oh, there's a cat in there. Just shove it out of the way.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it was just all these things. And I think that's where then the hurricane came. We talked about that little bit of wind and just kind of, I also found myself kind of taking that 1 degree turn and I'm like, let me refocus what my motivation for this is and what it's all about. And so I kind of came to you and I'm sitting here now with you and Envision and with the local leaders. And I just was like, this is what it's going to be. Because I think it also goes back to if I want people to kind of really listen and understand that this is constructive, then I need to make sure I treat it as a professional
100%.
thing. And so in the course of all this, something happened, which is, I guess, dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. Should I wait? I think I have a sound for that. Let's see, folks.
Oh.
How you like that? Fancy.
See, this is
I actually guessed the right one too, which is crazy.
This is why I can't record in a closet. We would have never gotten that
Would've never got
sound.
that.
Never. But before launching, I had kind of like considered and talked to doctors about bariatric surgery, and specifically the sleeve for me. And because, as I mentioned before, there are negative health effects to me carrying around this weight that I feel. And but I knew that before I figured it out that I wanted to work on my blood work. I wanted to get, my mind right. That was probably the biggest thing. Is I'm a big proponent of therapy. I think everybody should have their therapist. But the surgery could not be about me loving myself more. Like it had to be about my health, like my genuine health. Sure. It couldn't be about being skinnier. And I also wanted to find a balance in nutrition before I would even consider it, which is where, shout out again, Kylie comes in. Mm-hmm. But because if I couldn't find that, it was never going to be a tool. And
right.
And I know there are many opinions, but when I started in May, I started officially checking the boxes, and I went above and beyond. I have a dietitian, I hired a nutrition coach, I work out, and I regularly attend therapy, and I just told myself all of these things were just in case I decided to use this tool.
Sure.
And then in November, I was never more confident that bariatric surgery was going to be the best tool. And then I found out last week that my surgery is tentatively scheduled for December 27th.
Oh, wow. Coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's the wrong
that is
sound.
Not the right sound. Back to the closet, people.
That's what I wanted.
Back to the closet. And all of this is pending insurance approval. But instant excitement. There was instant relief. It was just like, oh my gosh, I've worked really hard for this. Like, I'm so excited for this tool. It's kind of, I akin it to my husband loves to do woodworking. In fact, our mutual friend Clint Sanchez saw a picture of my kid in the shop, and he's like, who works in there? Geppetto?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, I married Geppetto. Like
shoes and all.
He's a cobbler back there, y'all,
Yes.
making puppets that grow noses. Isn't that who made Pinocchio?
You lie.
I tell you. But I akin it to him, like he'll go to an antique shop and find like an old antique wood planer and be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I got this new tool. I akin that to be that phone call to that, like all of a sudden somebody was like, hey, you're getting this tool. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then something crazy happened. There was this sense of like, what are people going to think? And then I've worked so hard to love this body that I'm in to know that it will drastically change. There's a level of like grief, like I need to mourn it. Have I honored this body enough?
Yeah.
As if any of it carries emotion, like it's going to go somewhere and be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I hung out with her
I can't
for that
believe,
long.
Yeah, I can't believe she did this.
But then there's just the idea that like people just have opinions. And I was
Everybody
like,
has an
man,
opinion.
I'm about to do this and I'm talking about this line, and here I am. I want to talk about this line, and I feel like I have I'm an Enneagram 8 with a 7 wing. So I both have a desire to entertain people, but also like broach hard subjects, like for the principle of the matter. And I had to really remind myself that no matter what my size was, no matter what my journey was, I do feel like I have the ability and the personality to sit across the table for somebody and talk about this without really attaching tons of emotion, because everybody's journey is different. But yeah, so there was like this fear of like, not a fear of was I making the best choice for me, but a fear of like, what would this mean if I continued with the podcast, It was the podcast was never meant to be about size or weight loss. It was just meant to be about like, let's really discuss this and people's journey. And so I considered not saying anything, and I considered just kind of like letting it go and just letting people wonder and being like, oh, it's just calories in versus calories out, which is an infuriating response to anybody. Let me just say that. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but like it's just infuriating.
Yes. Nails on a chalkboard.
It's not that I didn't start this podcast for people to emulate my journey. And I think that's really important. And you touched on it earlier, is it's not about, let me tell you how to do it and let me emulate. It's about having people who go on this journey and having a conversation about it.
Right.
And so if I was going to do that and expect people to be transparent with me, I was like, I'm going to say it. Like, so, I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, me utilizing this tool changes nothing. You know, I'll still be exploring the thin fat lines. I'll still be like sharing my journey with you. I'll still share my why and motivations because I feel like it's a really important I think people want to know they're not alone, to build that community. And I mean, I'm still going to open up the seat across the table to talk about other people's journeys, from just people like me who are not professionals in the health and wellness industry, just have a story to tell, to the actual professionals in the industry. Sure. And I want it to be authentic. And I mean, I think you can't do that and then just kind of keep part of this, especially a part of it that is so much about your story.
100%.
So yeah, so I think that's why I paused for so long, because, you know, we talked about that. I was like, I want people to really understand. There was July 14th. I dropped it. It's wonderful. It has my oldest daughter in it. And then it was just like nothing. And I was like, I have to really
still here. Yeah.
I am. I have to tell people kind of like why. And I think stepping back was probably the best thing I could have done. No matter how much research I did, it was just like, this is just not. And thank God I did. I started taking a step back for the logistics, and then everything happened. So it gave me time to process without all eyes and ears.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it's a great thing. I'm excited. You know, and for the listeners out there, I would imagine you're going to kind of be consistent with it and on your drops and all of those sorts of things. As we kind of talked about that a little bit off camera. I gave her a little bit of the, you know, bumps that I went through in the tricks that I found.
Bumps.
Yeah, that's right. The guru stuff. I forgot that word. Yes, guru. But I think it's a phenomenal subject matter that a lot of people struggle with. And so, you know, at the end of the day, if you're doing something to help people and your premise is something that is just and good, only good things can come from that. So,
I 100%. And I think one of the things, and this goes into a subject matter that I am not going to touch on the podcast, but I remember hearing and I thought, man, that is amazing. But I was listening to NPR and it was like Fresh Air or something, and the girl who developed the hashtag Black Lives Matter was on, and she said something. She's like, I wish I would have said Black Lives Matter too, but that's irrelevant. What I wish people would do is when they have questions, instead of like typing out or getting all mad, say, help me understand. And I thought that was so powerful for her to say, is she's like, if you start everything with help me understand, she's like, because I don't think that anybody wants to be mean or offensive. I don't think anybody wants to exclude. I don't think anybody truly thinks, well,
I wouldn't say anybody.
Right. I was like,
there are some out there that, they probably got.
But like I said, I don't want it to be about that. But what was so important to me is that she's like, if you say, help me understand, you give space for people with different opinions that can be really hurtful to kind of say, help me understand how you came to that. Or if you really speak into a thing of, I'm not telling you because I want to change your mind. I can both understand your opinion on health and wellness without agreeing with it. And I think that's what's really important. Is I know even from this and my own journey, not everybody's going to agree with my decision to have bariatric surgery. You don't need to. No. And honestly, it's not your job or my job to make you understand, but I will come to you from a place of understanding, because I do believe there are a lot of people who are scared to have conversations with professionals because they're 100%. Like.
But let me ask you this. So from your perspective, you know, like you just said, help me understand, which is a good, would make for a great hashtag. But, so if someone's sitting across from you and let's say they don't necessarily agree, okay. And I've always felt like it's important for people of whoever you are to have somewhat of an open mind, and that, there are things in my life that at one point maybe I was on this side of the fence, I guess you could say. And then I realized, as you know, people change, they mature, or maybe they get more information.
Wait, pause. People can change their mind based on information. I had no idea that existed.
100%. You know, an open mind is a beautiful thing, because at least you're hearing another side of something. And like you say, at the end of the day, you may not agree with it. And then it's just two people agreeing to disagree. But at least you heard them out, right? On either side of that plane.
Well, I think it's really important to,
without
it's how
getting
we grow.
offended. Yes.
It's either how we become more secure and get more information on what we believe, or it's how we say, oh my gosh, I now understand more about how I can support be an ally, or whether it be anything, or I just learned to keep my mouth shut. In place. Yeah. I mean, let's not discredit, just sometimes it's not about you.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a beautiful thing too. But, you know, I think that goes to the open mind is I always love, and it's one of those cliche, like, I don't know, things. And it's like an open mind's like a mind is like an umbrella. It only works if it's open. And I think that that's really what it comes down to is it's not just about having an open mind, but if somebody sits across and disagrees with me, I think it's about saying, I want to ask questions, and they might feel really challenging, but I invite you to challenge me too.
And you're okay with that.
And that's not okay with that.
That's not something where you get like offended and shut down. And it's like you want to have a dialogue.
I want to have a dialogue.
At the end of the day, you may not agree. But
right. And I want everybody to have a dialogue. I think that's my thing. If I can inspire people to have a dialogue and stop being like, I'm concerned about your health. Have you ever thought about this?
Yeah.
Like, no. And I even think about people that are selling health and wellness. Like if you're in that industry and you aren't having a dialogue with people, you're cheating yourself out of success.
Sure.
Because you're never going to change minds. And that's, like I said, there's a whole other podcast on the fact that like most of the health and wellness industry is making money because they're banking on you failing. They are literally banking on your failing so you keep coming back.
Sure.
And it's like, it's such a short-term mindset, you know? And it's like, whereas we go into things with understanding, you will change the name of the game. Like imagine if people walked around and were really confident with who they were. And I'm not talking about cocky. I'm talking about true confidence where they love themselves. Think of how much room there would be to love other people.
Yes. I love myself and I love other people.
I don't have any.
But I'm not cocky. But I'm very comfortable in my skin and all of that. I mean, I don't look at myself and think I'm Tom Cruise.
Well, and the other thing is if you love your
Pitt maybe, but not Tom Cruise. Just kidding.
Have you seen me? My husband would probably be like, she's cocky on something. She's never wrong.
Yeah, well, that's everybody.
But, you know, I'm never wrong because he's never right. I love you, Ben.
Yeah, and the fact that you have an open mind is an important thing. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with somebody. There's nothing worse than somebody challenging you on something and then you go to speak on that subject and then they shut you down and say, oh no, I'm right, you're wrong, that's it. You know, there may be some things that person hasn't considered or that you haven't considered or whatever, and you're just kind of voicing those.
Right.
Because when you do a podcast, no matter what, you're opening yourself up to opinions. Well, you're inviting that. Right?
Every time you make a post on social media, you know, and we're both in the business industry too, I always get tickled when businesses get really angry about a bad review. And I'm like, but you do business. Yeah. You can't make everybody happy. And let me tell you, when I see nothing but 5-star reviews, I don't trust you.
Yeah.
Somebody didn't like you.
Yeah.
What people care about is not if you got a bad review, but how you respond to it. People aren't going to agree with me. And I don't have all the answers, but what matters is how I respond to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I mean by if you truly are comfortable with yourself and comfortable having a dialogue, imagine what that would look like on a whole throughout your community, throughout big and small, you know?
100%.
And my thing is I want to teach, you know, my only goal in this is to kind of be that generational stopgap to where I know that like our parents and people before were raised to be skinny at all costs, to media plays it into it. They still do. If I can just raise my kids to not only know how they should be treated, but how to treat other people and but more importantly, how to treat themselves, it'll be a win. And I think that's where the focus comes in, but it can't happen without having a dialogue with them too.
Yeah.
And so maybe this podcast is really just my vain attempt to have a platform to like actually talk to my teenager that doesn't listen to me all the time.
Sure.
To give me just a little bit more credibility with a 15-year-old. Maybe. But
you were never 15, ever.
Like, maybe just give me a little more credibility with her. But I think at the end of the day, I want to invite the dialogue, whether it be here, whether it be on social media. You know, there's always going to be keyboard warriors, and it's not.
Sure.
Unless you're just straight up bullying my community, like they'll stay there, but it doesn't mean, and you don't have to respond to every comment,
Right.
whether it be on the podcast or anything. There's just some stuff that it's like, hey, we're not going to go there. You know, like that's a hard thin fat line.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
you've crossed it. But I think that's really what it comes down to, is having those conversations and opening up.
So, and just to let everybody know, you know, she's going to get really personal on this thing and ultra personal. I'm kidding. There are some things she ain't got to talk about.
You're going to know everything.
Everything. But look, I salute you for having the nerve to, you know, kind of put yourself out there a little bit and open yourself up to positive and negative, really.
Right. And I hope it inspires people to kind of maybe just, even if it's just to me, even if it's just slide into my DMs. And that's what I said is like, I'll show up today, I'll show up tomorrow, I'll show up every single week to explore where this thin fat line is. But, you know, I invite you to come on my Instagram, which the podcast Instagram is at Thin Fat Line. My personal one is at Whit Andress. We're on Facebook, Thin Fat Line with Whitney, and on TikTok, which is Whit Talk Andress.
Whit Talk Andress.
She TikToks and she don't stop. No, I really don't. I am so terrible. I almost thought, I was like, I wonder if Jim and I could learn a TikTok dance and do it today. But that's my goal. But I mean, I think really the idea is like, if I can inspire people to just honor your body for what it does and not what it looks like.
Yeah.
Then like one person, then like I'll call like each week a win. And my hope is that by inspiring that one person, it becomes that snowball effect where more people.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's a great concept and premise and needed. And like you say, at the end of the day, if you help one person, maybe look in the mirror and not just be totally disgusted with what they're looking at.
Right.
You win, right? That's
absolutely. Win. And not be disgusted in the sense that like how you honor yourself is how other people are going to honor you.
100%. That is right. Yes. People know. People, absolutely. You know, and unfortunately, you'll be treated accordingly a lot of times.
And it is. And look, that doesn't mean I told the story about my little girl. She got in trouble at a store and we had a conversation. I said, when you make really good choices, most of the time, the chances are ever in your favor that good consequences will happen. But when you make bad choices, the chances are ever in your favor that bad consequences. And I think that goes to honor. When you honor yourself and honor the choices you make, you'll receive honor back.
That's right.
And I think we feel like we're not in control of other people. And the truth is we're not, but it's a hard pill to swallow when I realized that most of the people that I encountered were just mirroring my behavior toward myself back to me. Mm-hmm. And that was a really tough pill to swallow. There are people that are just so unhappy with themselves, they don't have anything good to say about you. Yes. And you have to kind of recognize that, man, that must be a really terrible place for them to sit in. I've sat there.
100%.
But yeah, you're a mirror, everything you get. So that's what I really, it goes down to that is if we explore the line, then understanding happens. And with understanding comes honor for all sorts of different journeys and opinions.
Yes. So, yeah. Look at you with the great quotes on a Monday. God.
Mondays.
On a Monday. Well, thank you for allowing me to be on your awesomeness show. And I hope I brought some sort of entertainment to it anyway.
I did. think it's great.
Nothing if not entertaining.
Well, and I think so many times we think of this as a female issue, and it's not. And
It's really not.
And I want to talk about that with you and more, that journey from the male's perspective later on. But I think it's really important that I'm excited to be in your studio. You've built an amazing studio. So
thank you very much.
I'm excited
She's not in her closet. There's no hangers around here.
Maybe that's, he told me that in this one, you'll see Local Leaders, the podcast, is subscribe and all this. He's like, you can hang anything. Maybe I'll just put like a closet backdrop.
That would be awesome.
Just be like, I'm still in the closet.
I actually had someone sit where I'm sitting right now, and they did a podcast, and they were struggling because they were doing it solo, and it's much harder to do when you're just talking and you don't have people to bounce things off of. And they kept looking at me. I was engineering, so I was where you were sitting, but in the corner. And they kept looking at me instead of at the camera. And so I had to stop them and say, now, this is your audience, this camera, not me. And they said, maybe it'll help if you put like a stadium of people behind the camera and I can look like I'm talking to them.
That is awesome.
I thought that was great. I'm like,
look above their head.
Weird.
I am. And, and I have thought about that as like, man, I'm going to be by myself. But that's why I'm excited that for this intro, even though you won't be here for, most of it, but
I'll be standing behind the camera.
Yes.
Maybe I'll wear Wonder Woman underoos.
Yes, I still have those. I'll bring those next time I come in. We'll talk about that. I really want to find like that missing blog. Like I started this blog. I have no idea what I called it or anything. So somewhere in the Blogger or the WordPress universe still exists this blog that I wrote back then. And I'm like, one day it's going to come up on my Facebook memories. I'm going to be like, there it is.
There it is. Share.
Yes. It's great. At the time, fun fact, I was working for Jennifer and Ty Barrett.
Yeah, really?
So I went to high school with Ty.
You're kidding.
No,
Okay.
so I worked for them because her parents owned Foxy's.
Yes.
So,
Mike Barrett.
Amazing human beings. So,
Yes. Used when I was in the paint business, I sold them all their paint for many, many years at Foxy's.
So a gym will keep you in business for paint.
Oh, yes.
So, so one day I'll find that blog and that'll be we'll tell the story of those Superman underoos.
I'd love it.
Maybe I'll bring my husband on to tell his side of the story since I like totally called him out for being a butthole about it.
Did do that.
So, well, awesome. Well, I'm excited. Thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to talking to y'all again.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Thin Fat Line. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll catch you in the next episode.